I'm kidding. I'm just trolling. I'm just trolling. I'm just trolling. I'm just trolling. Apparently, I'm just kidding, guys. I just thought that would go down well in a room in New York. No, but first of all, on a serious note, thank you everyone for coming out this evening. I know it's very hot. I know that the subway is incredibly congested, and so it's a bit of a trek to come up here to Harlem. But we're very grateful to have you all here. It's a very exciting day today on the cusp of the World Cup, of course, what we're going to talk about today and what we unpack in our special issue, which if you have not done so yet, please do grab a copy at the table at the back there, enough for yourself and enough for anyone you might want to distribute a copy to. Is that the World Cup is about to start very soon. And the World Cup, of course, on the one hand, is this enormous celebration of the world's game, but on the other hand, is riven with all of these contradictions which we have seen play out this week. So we're going to talk about that a little bit this evening, and I'm sure it's going to be something that we're going to be talking about throughout the tournament. But I'm not going to do that, thankfully. I'm just going to sit back and watch. I'm just here to tell you to grab a copy of the magazine if you haven't done so yet, to follow Africa as a Country online if you don't do so already. Check out the website. Follow us on all your socials. We're going to be covering the World Cup from below, which means immersing ourselves in the communities that power football as a sport. And as far as tonight is concerned, there are two rooms. So this is room 2, where the panels football is protest, which is this one that's about to start, is going to be. And the second one, what is a decolonized football? That's also going to be in this room. And if you want to check out any other panels, obviously you can't see the one happening now because you're in this one. But if you want to think about checking out the one that is going to be about Haiti and the politics of global sports, that's just around the corner in room 1. So I'm very, very honored that the people joining us this evening are Achille Tenkiang, Martino Simcik, Tony Karon, and Sean Jacobs. Achille is going to tell you who everyone else in the panel is, but I thought nobody is going to introduce Achille. So I took that liberty upon myself. And it's funny, Achille and I have kind of orbited around each other for a couple of years, and we have some mutual friends, and everyone who's met me has said, oh, you know, you kind of look like Achille. And I've never met Achille until now, and I've got to say, Achille is more handsome. So I think there is a kind of market difference there. So it's nice to finally put the face to the name and to hold space with you. So Achille Tenkiang is a Cameroonian American culture writer whose work examines African cultural history, politics, and contemporary art across the diaspora. He's also the founder and director of the Baldwin Institute, and he's based in Brooklyn, New York. And he's going to be moderating tonight's panel. So to Achille, Martino, Tony, and Sean, thank you very much for being with us today, and we look forward to hearing what you guys have to say.
Thank you so much, William, for that intro. One thing you forgot to mention is that I am from the greatest footballing nation on the African continent, history, Cameroon. But when I moderate, I actually love when my panelists introduce themselves. I'm just going to pass the mic down real quick, and you guys can go ahead and, yeah, provide some context.
Hello. Yeah. Okay. Hi. My name is Martino Simcik. I am a football journalist. I started working at Copa 90 about 12 years ago. For anyone who's familiar, make a lot of their kind of derby films and ran a lot of the editorial there. Over the last 3 years, I started my own media company called Mentalita. This is my 6th World Cup, and I'm kind of very familiar with a lot of the protest movements that have happened around both international tournaments and also amongst ultras groups and fan groups on continental and club football.
Keep it brief. Tony Karon, I'm from Cape Town, South Africa. Did my time in the liberation movement in the apartheid era, came to New York. I guess my day job is at Al Jazeera. I'm the editorial lead of something called AJ Plus, if you know it on social media. I've been working with Sean for decades, seems like. Basically teaching with Sean at the New School on the politics of global football, and I think I've even written a couple of things for Africa as a Country. Follow me on Substack. No, I mean, the intersection of football and liberation politics is an obsession. Right now, we have to figure out a way to get Israel out of international football. More on that in a bit.
Thank you. I'm Son Jacobs. I'm originally from Cape Town. Cameroon was briefly the best football nation in Africa. 1990, 1982 till about 1990. That's what we'll give. We'll give that. Anyway, as Will pointed out, like I founded Africa as a country. So the only thing about that is like I really want to congratulate Will, Boima, Maher, Samira. I don't know who else is here. You guys are incredible. So the main point is to say, whatever little bit I did, they're taking it to like another level, like the stratosphere. So I'm actually very happy. I might actually end up forgetting anything that I'm gonna say because I'm just like marveling at like what you guys have pulled off. So this is incredible for me. So I'll say like two quick things. The first World Cup I cared about was 1982, and it was Brazil. And that's also because, what's the word? I'm messing up my words here. Like I was living vicariously through the Brazilian team because South Africa at the time, right, was banned from international football. As Tony said, we would like that to happen to Israel. And so South Africa wasn't playing, and there was a team that looked like us. Like, I mean, a lot of what's going on in Brazil, which we won't get into, but on the face of it, like we were like, whoa, that's a team that kind of looks like us, and they kind of play like the footballers around where we were living. And then I'll just say this: I think France is going to win the World Cup. Like I know it's complicated. We can get into all those things, but I think France will win the World Cup.
Allez les Bleus. Okay, yeah. So this panel is football is protests, and it's really important that we leave some time for you guys to ask questions. But we're gonna kind of structure this conversation in three different parts. The first, looking at the historical arc. The second, contemporary cases, and the third will be what makes protests work. So, opening question. Nkrumah framing the FIFA dispute as a Pan-African political emergency feels almost anachronistic today. And the question I have for you guys is like, what did football mean to newly independent African states that made it a legitimate area for geopolitical struggle?
I could go first. So what Achille is talking about is in the run-up to the 1966 World Cup. So up until at that point, Africa did not have a direct kind of, like a path to qualifying. Africa had to play Oceania and Asia for one place. So there was like 16 spots in the World Cup. Europe had the bulk of the spots along with South America. And so in the run-up to that World Cup, Kwame Nkrumah told these like newly independent African nations that they should boycott this World Cup and not go to it, and demand like a direct qualification. So in other words, like sadly, only one spot for an African team. And so the African countries decided not to go. And I think we will talk about this, but this is the one instance where a boycott action by a group of nations, not in relation to the whole of FIFA, which we can talk about South Africa in a minute, but just in relation to the World Cup. This is the one moment where a group of nations decided not to go to the World Cup, to like boycott the World Cup. And the result is that in 1970, Africa was granted like one direct qualifying spot. Now we're at 10, but we had to start somewhere. So in a way, Kwame Nkrumah, like by spearheading this moment and this movement, like changed the way about how we think about like boycotts, like the use of sports as a political tool. And just a footnote on this is ironically also the World Cup in which Eusebio is like the best player of the tournament. So an African-born player is the best player of the tournament, but he's not representing an African country. I think I've forgotten the question. Yeah, I just wanted to give that little bit of context so people are on the same page.
Oh no, and thank you so much for providing that context. I guess the question that I want to pose to you guys is thinking about what football meant to newly independent African. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take two things. I think the one is like, because in the way that you represent yourself internationally as countries, as these new countries, there's this kind of idea that you're not a country unless you have a football team. So the football team, I know Tony will say something about, or we'll talk about even where there weren't a country and people sort of played or willed a country into being through football. But the idea is like, if you're a country, you had to have like, team, like a sports team. And football was this kind of object that you could use. So that's the first thing. I think the idea that like through football, you can represent your country on the global stage. And secondly, I think through football, you can make yourself matter. Because something, and I'll stop after this, the thing about international sports bodies is international sports bodies, along with the UN, was the one place where each country had one vote. So up until the independence of Africa and Asian countries, of course, Europe dominated. South America has like what, 12 or 13 countries, right? In what is the South American Association called again? CONMEBOL, right? Or 10 countries. They have no qualification, which is why we say that CAF is more difficult, but let's leave that. But in any case, up until that point, Europe dominated, and the fact that there were all these newly independent African countries, they could make their weight like count on the international level, both in the IOC with the Olympic boycotts against South Africa, and within FIFA with this boycott in 1966.
Can I talk about Algeria? Okay. I mean, just referencing what Sean was talking about, I mean, this is like, anybody who knows the story knows it's like the most magical football liberation story. Taking the sort of theoretical counterpoint to what Sean says, which is also why he calls his football blog 11 Named People, the quote from the British historian Eric Hobsbawm that says, "Nowhere is the imagined community of the nation more real than in the form of 11 named players on a football field." Okay, so the national imaginary in the contemporary era, and the era particularly of mass media, is very, very much bound up with rituals like football. Like if you just think about French people, right? When do they sing their national anthem other than when the football team is playing? Talking about your ordinary citizen, like nobody goes to national parades or whatever, but they're in the pub, the Blue are playing, and everybody's singing the national anthem as if it means something. Very problematic national anthem about irrigating your fields with the blood of the impure. It's that we'll leave all that aside. So basically, that's relevant perhaps also because the situation in 1958, Algeria is colonized. Algeria is not even treated like, a colony in the way that we would imagine Ghana being a colony. It's treated as if it's part of France. It's a province. It's, so in their minds of the French authorities, nothing problematic about having Algerian players on your national football team. And there are actually 4 or maybe 5 in the 1958 France squad for the World Cup. And the Algerian underground actually pulls this absolutely brilliant move where it just, if you think about it, risks a lot of its infrastructure, underground infrastructure. That's very hard to build, very hard to replace. And the people doing this work are going to get tortured if they get captured, right? And what they do is they arrange an underground system to basically spirit away not only the 5 players who are meant to represent France in 58 in Sweden, but also, 6 or 7 other players who are playing in the French league. Most famous is Rachid Makhloufi, becomes the manager, first the captain of the newly independent team, and later the manager. I think Mustafa Zeytouni was the other really famous one from Monaco. And they basically spirit these guys out of the country. They get to Switzerland, they get to Italy, they get to Tunisia, and they form a football team. There's no Algerian nation state at this point. And the idea of an Algerian nation state is not yet, conventional wisdom. And they forge this team. FIFA obviously won't recognize it. France runs to FIFA and says, you will take sanctions against any team that plays against them. But you're talking about a bifurcated world. The newly independent countries, the socialist countries, play against this team. And this team tours. And this team conjures a national identity into being. It's the most powerful indicator of that thing that you create something in a space of popular culture that represents something that may not materially exist yet, at least in the form of a state, but the concept of the nation that's going to legitimize that state is brought into being in a way that's unparalleled by it's not like Algerians are waiting for a football team to imagine themselves as Algerians, not French, but the powerful statement of that on the world stage. I was recently on a panel with Hanital Jia, who was the first Palestinian women's captain. And she talked about how being on the football field for Palestine feels different to any other format. You are seen, you are represented, you are equals on a world stage, and that feeling is very, very, very powerful. But I'll stop there for.
Just to chime in real quick, Martino, before you, because I really loved that framing, Tony, about the FLN team and how they created a national team out of something that didn't really exist. Could you like briefly just sort of talk about like how that changes what we even mean by protest?
I mean, I think it's, can one call it a terrible American expression?
It wasn't a refusal to play, right?
No,
So,
no,
like,
on the
yeah.
contrary, it was much next level. I mean, if Algeria was boycotting, if Rashid Makhloufi had gone, well, you know what, I'm not feeling well, I'm going off to Algeria to recuperate, that doesn't make a statement. This is a statement next level of engagement from boycott, which is passive and withdrawing. This is like taking the offensive. It's like, actually, we are here, and these assets you claim as your own are actually not yours. And here they are expressing something, that is beyond your control, and it's signaling this is what's coming. This is why people are fighting. And people are fighting. I mean, this is happening at the same time. I was reading an account today of I think it's Mohammed Maouche, is one of the recruiters who was contacting the players, and the woman underground activist who was his partner was, they posed as newlyweds driving around France, but they were actually going to have meetings. But she did tell all the players, this is an order. It's not, liberation movements are, sometimes they're orders. But yeah.
I mean, just, I guess, two things that I would add to this. I mean, I obviously have way less of a historical perspective to give on this, but like, one is just in the names of all of the African national teams. I think it's a useful point to always hammer down on, which is like, they've chosen these very prideful names, right? So it's like the Indomitable Lions, the Super Eagles, right? Like, they're like almost overcompensationally proud as names, right? And I think that really speaks to this phenomenon. And then, like, I don't know, maybe some other examples also where like boycott has been used in football also outside of the African continent. I mean, I think the first example I can think of is the players of Hajduk Split, who refused to join when Mussolini takes over Split, and they refused to play in a league where they would be in Bari's stadium, and they all become partisans and move off to an island. Another example of like Russia boycotting '74 after Pinochet and Allende. Oh, you'll tell it better. I'll leave it to you, historians.
I mean, this is just very, very quickly. Basically, there's a qualifying match between Chile and Soviet Union to go to '74 in Germany. The first leg is in Moscow. It's 0-0. They've got to play at the Santiago Stadium. 2 months after the Santiago Stadium has been Pinochet's torture chamber, Victor Jara and hundreds of others have literally been murdered in that stadium by the regime. And the Soviets, I mean, bless them, who knew a bit of proletarian internationalism in the rhetoric, at least still survive. But they said, we will not play football on a field irrigated with the blood of Chilean patriots. So they didn't show up. FIFA, bizarrely, has the game played. So a referee takes the field, the 11 Chilean players take the field, referee blows the whistle, they walk the ball into the net, full-time whistle. It's counted as a match. But yes, the Soviets gave up the chance to go to.
And then maybe on a club level, I guess the last example, because it keeps coming up, and I'm sure it's on everyone's mind in terms of boycott in football in Palestine, is the Iraqi team from Baghdad who refused to play Maccabi Tel Aviv in the final, I think, of '76, which then triggered Israel to move into European competition. It was the Asian Cup final was in the '70s, right? And then there's the move, but it starts this kind of whole process, and I don't know, and in that, like, I don't know. I can't deal with the international relations of this issue, but like in a world where Israel still played football in Asia, maybe we'd have a closer chance for peace.
Interesting. Thank you guys so much. Now, moving on. Oh, Sean. Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Sean.
I mean, the thing, quickly on two things. One is on just this question about Algeria, like what is that? So I think obviously it's a kind of a form of affirmative politics is what you were saying, like this kind of the idea of next level. But it's also, I don't want to quote Gramsci, but it's also kind of like, it's like war of position. It's like, how do you, basically you changing the conversation like about this place as a colony and its relationship to France by essentially, you know, trying to win this war, like about hegemony. And I think the other one I wanted to quickly say about, so when we talk about when we talk about the example of 1966, I think a whole bunch of other things were also happening. Martino mentioned like these other moments. South Africa was becoming an issue internationally. And so what was happening in South Africa by 63, the boycott movement in South Africa it moved from saying, oh, we want Black South Africans to have the same kind of opportunity to play sport. You know, the way that the whole occupied territories thing work, which is like with FIFA, you tell FIFA, they preventing me from going to a field, or we being harassed going to a checkpoint. So initially that was the South African focus of the boycott movement, but something changed after the independence of these new African independent countries. So the formation of the Supreme Council on Sport in Africa, which a lot of people, I would recommend anybody studying sports history, go look at that organization. They were very crucial in coordinating the activities of these African countries, and then on behalf of Africa, like coordinate with the Eastern Bloc, etc., to get South Africa out of international sport. So I think there's the other element is not that just you need a sports team, we're new and independent, and this is how we operate on the international level. It was also something was changing in the way that kind of sports organizations were being organized. Yeah.
Thank you. And actually, does anyone want to touch on real quick the 1976 Montreal Olympics, IOC? I think that's yeah.
I mean, the story of 1976, very quickly, I mean, we're giving all these like great examples. You know, there's something called Google, there's YouTube. People are making like little shorts, right, and all these things. They get it wrong. I saw Brenda was like, some of that stuff. But in any case, 1976 it's about rugby. So basically, again, I've written about the International Sports Boycott plug. So if you want to go just Google, you'll see I wrote a whole thing about the sports boycott, a whole article about it. But essentially what happened is, at the end of the 60s, there's a shift in the way to isolate South Africa, which is to move away from like this focus on FIFA and the IOC, the Olympics, right? Because South Africa gets kicked out of the Olympics in 64. And then there's the great, the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City. So after that, the focus becomes, we need to go after sports that the white minority cares about, rugby and cricket. So there's these tours, they're getting disrupted in England. The cricket team and the rugby team go play in England. They also play in Australia. This is long before the 1981 tour of New Zealand, like Australia. Nobody talks about what had been happening in Australia. But in any case, subsequent to that, nobody wanted South Africa to tour overseas anymore. So then these teams would go to South Africa. And in 1976, New Zealand decided to go play a bunch of tests in South Africa. If you remember, the 1976 riots were happening, etc., in the wake of the riots. Then there was the Olympics that summer in Montreal, and a whole group of African countries said, we're not coming to this Olympics if New Zealand is going to be in the Olympics and if they go to South Africa. Now, obviously, New Zealand had a conservative government. They still went, but there was a whole crisis around that where, again, the African countries like showed their muscle because, as you know, we're very good in the middle distances. And they were like, we're not going to that Olympics. This is when they start to win in the middle distances. So there's that example. I mean, it's not as effective, I would say, as 66. It's more at the level of we threatening to boycott rather than we actually boycott. But it did result in, after that, there were no more tours to South Africa until the mid-1980s by what were called rebel teams, who sort of broke sanctions. But it was the last proper rugby tour to South Africa.
Can I add something about
something real quick?
No, I think what's really important, and hold this thought because we're going to talk about Palestine. What changes the equation on the rugby front is mass direct action in New Zealand, right? By this fantastic organization called Halt All Racist Tours. You can have processes going in parallel in the institutions, in the rugby board, in the lobbying, the lawyers, the administrators, whatever. I mean, honestly, that's going to take a very long time, and they're only going to move when we, civil society, gives them no choice. What happened in New Zealand in '81 was it became impossible to play rugby because there was like mayhem going on on the fields. Like they couldn't actually stage these games. It was ripping New Zealand society apart, and that's when it changed. They had no choice. Like they made a smart decision. In the same way as they say, by the way, they say they had no choice but to kick Russia out after it invaded Ukraine because teams would refuse to play against Russia. So they make decisions when they don't feel like they have a choice.
No, thank you, Tony. That's an excellent segue to, I guess, this next section, thinking about contemporary cases. And I guess there are sort of three key that come to mind. Morocco in 2022, when the Palestinian flag raised after every match, including after they defeated Spain. AFCON 2025, Senegal's walk-off, and CAF's 3-0 forfeiture ruling. FIFA in Israel, Russia banned, in 4 days, and nearly 1,000 athletes killed in Gaza. 300 facilities destroyed, and there's been no action. So this next question, what's structurally different about contemporary protests compared to the 60s and 70s? And what would you say is surprisingly continuous?
Maybe you want to talk about that.
I think you guys should go first. I can, but they should go first. Oh, I should, okay. What's structurally different, but before I answer that, let me just say something else, which when Tony was talking about the rugby tour of New Zealand by South Africa in 1981, that is also so, and this is, if you think, as Tony said, keep making like mental notes about Palestine. So what's interesting about 1981 is South Africa got television for the first time in 1976. So all the protests that were happening against South Africa internationally, when the rugby team and the cricket team were playing, people at home weren't seeing it. They couldn't see it live. They didn't know about it. It wasn't on the news. They could hear it on the radio, and it was being kind of edited for them that these are agitators. They don't like us. They don't like the way we live, and the blacks are communists. So in 1981, now there's television. This whole tour is being broadcast live on TV, and so all the disruptions that you see on television at the stadiums, like people in helmets, marching, coming, it's on the news every night. And so there's like studies where white South Africans who were supporters of the state, of the apartheid state and of the ruling party, begin to sort of go, yo, I didn't know that. And I have friends who said this to me. They like watching this with their parents and going like, I don't know, that's what they thought about us. I thought we were okay, we're part of the West. No, I know all of you like shaking your head, but this stuff was really powerful as, come on, think about this place and its organizing myths and how powerful they are. They're like, oh, I didn't know they think that about us. So that's something I think that, just to mention that, the quick answer to the question of like, what is different? Like we said, what's different about the 1960s is that there is a kind of unifying ethos that is present among these newly African independent states. There's a really good sense of Pan-Africanism that they sort of organizing around. Leftist politics in the global South is predominant, and people are organized around it. It's not as, I don't think it's easy right now to kind of find a way to get African countries, Asian countries, etc., South America to sort of combine. Although it's not impossible, if you look at Black Lives Matter and how it became a global movement, you can see that there are possibilities, but it's a very different world, I think, that we live in.
Yeah, should I go? I mean, the one structural difference that's sort of coming to mind, the more I think about FIFA in this current moment, it's like, FIFA is one of those multilateral institutions that came into its current form in that post-World War II era. And that post-World War II era is defined by kind of geopolitical competition between the Soviet bloc and the West, and the emergence of the decolonizing world, and that dynamic. It was always a mystery to me. Wait, how did they vote to partition Palestine in the UN in 1948? And it's like, oh wait, look at how many member states there were, 51, and 31 of them voted for it. So all of Africa and most of Asia was actually not having a vote because they weren't independent yet. So, you see, well, the UN has 191 member states today. And, you can also see imperialism actually starts to disempower those multilateral institutions, particularly after the Cold War. So like a lot of the norms and processes that actually, the UN becomes very a lot more democratic. Not, it's still got the Security Council veto thing, but the General Assembly can vote on things, and it's decolonized. And suddenly, you know, the kind of imperial monopoly on power and hegemony is kind of stripped away. And so the importance of the UN has to be kind of degraded, and it is. And the UN becomes kind of ignored systematically. And almost in the Trump era, you see that even more profoundly. Like, forget about the UN Security Council. There's this thing called Board of Peace now that can decide an Albanian island is like, actually, that's a good resort, etc. You know, it's like all of the international law is being trashed. And I mean, I really fear we're going into an era now where the imperial habits and processes are very different. They're not, we can't assume the norms of the 20th century are going to apply. And I'm beginning to think, wait a minute, FIFA actually may be one of those norms of the 20th century that, you know, as you say, each country in Africa has a vote. And so you can get rid of South Africa. Of course, that also because João Havelange is a clever and cynical chap, and he's aligned with the Brazilian dictatorship, but recognizes that his path to power in FIFA is enlisting the African vote by getting rid of South Africa. But, you know, I think some of those institutions, as we've known them, are weakened. Like the way Infantino is behaving is bizarre. Like, it's unthinkable from FIFA 10 to 15 years ago that you would be handing out peace prizes and buckling to, you know, no, it was a problematic, hell yeah. Say what?
The history of FIFA, was it unthinkable for FIFA to do something this weird and crazy?
Yeah, okay.
Argentina, like, I don't think it's...
I mean, yeah, I think...
Mussolini hosted a World Cup, Hitler hosted a World Cup.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's a history of accepting dictatorship, of having this kind of neutral... I mean, he didn't go and pin a medal on...
Part of the course, I think.
Right, but FIFA didn't go pin a medal on Videla. Yeah, you know, I mean, that's like next level. Yeah. Like, I mean, but yeah, you're right.
Instagram existed, I think. I think when I think about this conversation, I also think that it's important to kind of there's the boycotts of states, and that's a very effective kind of move and has worked, and that's because you have enough political consensus to where a nation state can go like, no, we're not doing this. And then there's the boycotts of fans, and like the attempted boycotts of fans and how those play out in different ways. Like I remember Ukrainians being uncomfortable with the World Cup in Russia and murmuring about it, and people talking about the World Cup in Russia being problematic. The BBC did the big investigation on the Russian hooligan scene, and it kind of got swept under the rug, and no one took a big position on it. And for better or for worse, I took a 72-hour train with Peruvians, and there was no internet, and we had some of the most amazing experiences of our lives, for instance. Or then you went to Qatar, and I did this project where I went with 2 athletic journalists, and we took buses and trains all the way from Qatar to Istanbul, and then we flew to Jordan. And all of Europe was furious about this World Cup, and we got to Jordan, and it was the best thing ever. And it went from being like the anti-gay World Cup to the pro-Palestinian World Cup. And there was this kind of dividing line between the two, and how do the two coexist? And yeah, I guess now we're at this US one, but like you remember the Confederation Cup in Brazil, there were riots everywhere. Brazil lost 7-1. A company called Odebrecht screwed up the whole thing, like ironically a German company. You know, South Africa took out loans from the World Bank. The last thing I saw when I was leaving the World Cup was like talks about xenophobic attacks because everyone was pissed at the construction workers. Germany bribed Saudi Arabia with 60 tanks to get their World Cup. Korea, like everyone knows what happened in the Korea games against Spain and Italy. The referee got arrested in an airport in New York trafficking heroin a few years ago. 98 is the year Sarkozy signs the deals with the Qataris and sells off Paris's biggest sporting institution to a royal family, which banned fans for life for protesting against the Qatar World Cup. So, like, in 94 was the US where the CIA probably screwed up Iraq's games so they couldn't qualify. You know, then I guess Italy 1990 is the closest thing. I don't know. It's a little bit, there's a nature to World Cup, which is also like music festivals, right? Where everyone looks back on it and it's like, oh, it's not as good as it used to be, with this kind of continuous nostalgia. But like, it's really easy to poke holes into how kind of dark all the World Cups have been in the back end. And like, guys, like, it's nations competing each other, and maybe there's a bigger discussion to be had about the dynamics of nationalism and celebrating it in this way when it's probably really incoherent to a world of bigger, greater peace, maybe.
No, thank you, Martino. circling back to Infantino, for those who don't know, he's the president of FIFA. Yeah. What does it mean that this institution keeps appointing itself the referee of legitimate resistance protest?
I mean, I'm not sure I'd phrase it that way. And I mean, in a way, FIFA, I'm guessing, is all about image rights in a way. And it's all about image rights for the donors, essentially for the advertisers. It's like what's acceptable to Coca-Cola is going to matter a lot more than what's acceptable to 20 or 30 football associations, which are also basically corrupted by the structure of FIFA, because each member FA has a vote, but also the government of that country can't interfere with the football association. So you can have a corrupt football association in Kenya, and the government can say, no, take it down, and then Kenya gets banned from FIFA. That actually happened suspended for a period. So it's kind of a closed system of bribery and corruption. But I mean, I don't think you can. Yes, they can sort of sanctify particular forms of protest, but anything that's sanctified is not protest. I mean, to begin with. So it's really a question of what are the factors. Say, for example, I mean, it's kind of shocking to me that you haven't had more players speaking out about Gaza and taking stands on Gaza. And you've had a handful, and you've had some very powerful, symbolically powerful figures in the game, like Cantona, like Gary Lineker. And you've had moments. I mean, Fedi Kanute was, I don't know if anybody remembers, that Fedi Kanute, when he was still a player at Spurs, tried to organize a boycott of a Euro under-21 tournament that was being held in Israel. But just didn't get that kind of sign-on. Yeah, I mean, you get odds and ends, but you don't. It seems to me like players operate in a system where they're incredibly controlled, their image rights by the clubs, by their agents, by their sponsors, etc. And you've had these, I mean, you sort of see Paul Pogba and Ahmad Diallo at the end of the United season brandishing the Palestinian flag on the field. And most recently, Lamine Yamal grabs the Palestinian flag in the Barca celebrations, and like literally the Israeli Defense Ministry is writing to the Spanish government saying this is, an attack on us and so on. But it feels to me the more because if you look at the dynamics in Ireland right now, where Ireland is due to play a Euro something qualifier against Israel, Nations League or whatever it is, and you have this agitation that's not picking up among all the players in the league, and that fantastic protest a couple of weeks ago where people go to a friendly game, Ireland-Qatar, and they throw tennis balls onto the field with little Palestinian flags saying stop the game. But now it takes time to get tennis balls off a field. It disrupts the game. And instead of, people condemning it, you have Seamus Coleman, the Irish captain, saying, you know what, this is bullshit. Like, we as players should not be forced into this position. We're decent human beings. We can see what's happening in Gaza. We should not have to play them. You have the sports commentators who you expect to be right-wing, apolitical, going, you know what, like, it's time somebody took a stand. So, you see that if there is going to be something changing on this front, or on any front really, like, the power of fans and players really is far, far more, because it's a spectacle. It's all about the spectacle. They have far more power than they realize, I think. That, yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful, but yeah, cautious.
I really, as when we were talking about like the context of like fan protests, I think that it's important to talk about like the origin of like ultras culture, where like a bunch of Italians start standing and behind a stadium and start singing. It comes from these like political period in Italy between 68 and 74, which we call the years of lead, where like hundreds of people were dying a year from political violence, and a lot of the protests moved from the streets into the stadium. So like the first message you'll see in an Italian stand that's political is for the right to divorce in 1973, because it doesn't get legalized in Italy until 74. From a group of female AC Milan fans. And so I think that like it's important also to understand like where does fandom come from, and like where do we still have this idea that like we can have some role in changing or fixing FIFA when we've seen its behavior patterns since its founding, right? But there is this kind of myth that we feel like we can have some role in fixing and dealing with it. And yeah, I just think it's important to acknowledge like how much fans have always had this stake in the game, how much the commercialization of the game has been a slow process, that as the fans don't become the main stakeholders because their money is not as valuable as, you know, like a lot of the problems European have with American soccer fans, your guys is paying for high TV contracts means that we don't have a role in a say in our clubs. And the more you buy Arsenal shirts, the more our role as Arsenal fans matters less, you know, for better or for worse. And it sucks, but like that's the inevitable reality of it. I don't know. So I don't know where I'm going with this really, but I think it's like important to think about like why fans feel that they have this role in doing things. And yeah, what happened this time around that no one managed to pull anything off? Like, where was all the collective thing?
Why do you think clubs are scared of that? Like when you have fans threatening because ticket prices are going up. Like what's the power in the chemistry of what's sold? Like the spectacle that's sold that makes the TV rights valuable includes the players. I mean, sorry, includes the fans, right?
Yeah, but the fans then they're a critical voice. They can like co-opt the system just to do things. A great example, we were talking about the offensive Mexican chant whenever the goalkeeper kicks off the ball. Like Mexicans co-opted that to be like, who are you, Mexican FA or FIFA or American Federation, doing like BS trials in Miami about corruption scandals, telling me what I can and can't say in a football stadium or being in any way an arbiter of morality, right? And so I think that it challenges them because it kind of lifts it like pulls back the curtain on the Wizard of Oz a little bit.
I mean, what I'm talking about though is like, so it's driven by prices, right? But at a certain point, like Liverpool fans have done this twice, where they're like, okay, if you're going to push this the price up, we're going to walk out of the stadium in the 70th minute. That's a huge sacrifice for a Liverpool fan to walk out of a game. But the moment they've gone, the atmosphere in the stadium, the value of the spectacle, the compelling nature of that spectacle changes. It's like, as we discussed earlier, it's like the COVID stadiums where you can hear the ball being kicked. So I think there is power, or some residual power. It's not, I mean, it's not anything like we'd expect it to be, but it can, I mean, it is possible for fans to have some impact because of their, I mean, it's going to be really interesting because of the prices and the restrictions, etc. This World Cup, I imagine, is going to be the dullest television spectacle in terms of the atmosphere, just because everybody's kind of mostly rich and rich people don't make a lot of noise.
Sean, before you chime in, I have just a really quick question for you guys. Would you say FIFA is more sort of entrenched, invested in the logic of global capitalism and imperialism than, say, other international sporting bodies?
I'm not gonna, I don't have the empirical data in front of me. So I'm not gonna give an answer because I don't have the study stuff, but I'll answer quickly. I mean, I think you, Martino, you said earlier about like the way you experienced the World Cup by the time you got to Jordan. I think that's this thing about like the ability of the fan to kind of challenge this kind of thing that you were like outlining, that horrible history that's always been there. And you pointed there to like in Qatar, how that World Cup became this pro-Palestinian World Cup. So even if it's true that FIFA is controlling the stadium, the area around the stadium, like what you can sell, what kind of things you can buy, it's somehow, and what kind of flags you could bring. I get it that it was in Qatar, so maybe that maybe contributed to it. So there's a way in which Palestine then became this, what is like the 33rd team. Like if a fan was being interviewed, just some random Bolivian or somebody like says like Free Palestine, whatever. So it became this like weird thing. So there is this thing in which it's impossible to this is our paradox about this thing. Like like you guys were showing, it's like this horrible thing that we are a part of, but there's also a way in which we always insist that it's our thing. And I think that World Cup, so yes, it's this, I don't know if it's worse than the Olympics or better, like in terms of how it's been captured, but there's also a way in which there's always been this like history at which people demand that this thing belongs to us. I have this theory, which, and you were pointing about how people talk about every World Cup, you know, before and during and after, but there is something about like once this World Cup's going to start, there's going to be something. It might things might be, people will experience it differently. Maybe not in the stadiums, but in the fan parks, in the bars, on the like sidewalk. This whole thing about the Knicks and like how people are watching the Knicks like in like Hell's Kitchen on like a street corner, sitting in front of a bodega with a little TV. I think that's what the World Cup. But it will not change anything of what you were listing. It's not going to change it, but I think there's something about that democratic ethos that we feel about what this thing means to us.
I mean, I just think FIFA's, the Olympic Committee went through a big reform a few years ago. And so like, they're not taking all of Los Angeles's tax money for 5 years or whatever. There's like a more equal restitution of this money. Like FIFA seemed to go through a reform. It built out a system of kind of like investigating itself and basically trying to improve on its problems. And it's just come out like a three-headed like monster hydra of evilness. Like it's just gotten so much worse. I don't know. So I think that's the kind of concerning thing about FIFA is that like, yeah, they seem to be taking giant leaps backwards somehow.
I mean, yeah, I think that's a symptom of FIFA being responsive mainly to its advertiser. FIFA's become a business to an extent that, I think it's always been corrupt, but I don't think you've ever had sort of projected profit margins of like $14 billion from a World Cup. Like, it doesn't feel like public service. I could be wrong.
It's also the,
tell me I'm wrong.
no, it's also the United States though. Like if you tried to pull this off in Brazil, people would lose their minds. There's no way you could do this in Italy. People would freak out. Like in France, forget it. Like forget it. Like fucking the Paris is on fire. Like, so there's also kind of an American complacency to being used to like having to pay for a breath of air.
Awesome. So I have just one final question before we open up to Q&A. I think one thing that I've sort of gathered from this conversation is the fact that football in many ways has always been a mirror to I guess who held up power. A mirror held up to power, and one can argue that the mirror is still there. So my final question is, who in football today has the courage to look, and who has the power to make sure nobody does?
I mean, these guys haven't given me much hope now. So I'm trying to, like, no, I'm just saying, like, the way you both describe, like, the structures and the history of football, and, like, the way in which players are hamstrung, so you wouldn't get, like, a Paul Breitner. He was a Maoist, by the way, but a weird one. Or like this idea that there are these like players within like a Hector Bellerin, and how he projects himself, right? Or Marcus Rashford, who's been sort of corralled, that he would never, I don't think he would ever do that again because he got sort of scrutinized and it killed his career and he had to leave and go play in Spain. So I don't know, if it's like who, we have to look at the main actors, right? The main actors are the players. Tony sort of pointed out the extent to which players are impossible. It's impossible for them to like have some kind of independence. I think I saw a story, I don't know if it's true, but I saw like Kylian, I don't know why I said that. Kylian Mbappe and I think Ryan Cherky and one other player complained because they were in an ad and then they didn't know that the French Football Federation was using this like photos that they were taking for a partnership with a gambling company. So there's like, it's harder for players. And I'll say one other quick thing. So it's harder for the players. It's harder for governments. Tony is correct. Like this way that FIFA is structured, it's harder for governments to intervene in the governance of football. And then with the World Cup, and I think Martino is correct, the US is this weird like thing that we're now encountering, but it is true in the history of FIFA that when there's a World Cup, you have no control over the area around the stadium. FIFA makes its own courts. I don't know if they're doing it this time. They had their own courts. Like you did something, you wore like a jersey in the stadium, like a promotion or something that's not theirs. Boom, you grabbed, you arrested, you were prosecuted, etc. So I don't know who is this. I mean, my hope is still with like what I described about this thing that happened in Qatar, and I get it. It wasn't in the US, it was in Qatar. But I still have hope with the fan.
Yeah, similarly. Actually, I do think it's very much on the fans, that the fans are going to put the pressure that's going to give the space potentially to the players. Like, what gives Lamine Yamal the courage to do what he did? Right? Because that's a huge violation of the sort of code of silence that's been imposed. And does that open the way to others? Like they can't, I mean, it's a good combination of factors. He's dealing with a government that's actually the most progressive of the European governments in terms of taking a stand. So, you know, literally the Prime Minister Sanchez is coming out supporting him, even though the Barcelona ownership is going, oh, no, this is not what we stand for, blah, blah, blah. So there is, you can see that daylight shines through here and there. And you know, I think if the fans were against that, I don't think there'd be much space for it. But to the extent that the fans are kind of encouraging that, you know, there's hope. And it's kind of, I've just noticed in the last few days, right? Infantino is panicking. Infantino is panicking because everybody, the ref, the Somali ref was just like a WTF moment where like lots of politicians, etc., going like, wait a minute, how does that, yeah, how's it, I mean, the guy is appointed by FIFA, he's been vetted, blah, blah, blah. It's just like he arrives at the airport, a lot of immigrants know this experience, you arrive at the airport, you pulled over and like, okay. But you can see that this was like crossing a line for a lot of people. I don't know if there'll be any consequences of action. Yeah, and almost you can see players starting to speak about it. Infantino's like, everybody needs to chill out. Like literally he said that today, like, hey, like, you know, let's just enjoy the World Cup. You know, it's like, be cool, like they're doing what they do. Like you can see he's feeling it. And I mean, you hope he's going to feel it more. I agree with you. He's not going to do, I mean, I don't think FIFA is savable under Infantino. There's no question. I know there's a petition campaign to get rid of FIFA. I don't know, you know, how petitions are going to change equations. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't give up entirely on football civil society actually flexing its muscles.
Thank you, Tony. Martino.
One thing, the one thing that terrifies me more than FIFA is the FIFA turning into the NBA or the NFL, or like a privately run organization where like a board of 8 people who have control over all the teams distribute the funds equally amongst themselves. And yeah, like that's not a model I'd necessarily love. Although I would love maybe like wage limits and some like better run version of football so Bayern Munich doesn't win for 20 straight years, but like, there's got to be a balance between that. I think that when it comes to FIFA, I don't know, there's the biggest thing anyone can do is fans, right? Like that's the most active community of people that can self-organize and do something, but that can't be left up to fans acting as individuals. That it has to be organized fan associations who come together and do things. Like the coolest thing this World Cup is going to be the Scottish guys who've taken over some village in the middle of Rhode Island and are taking children's school buses all over the East Coast to get to their games. And by being organized and doing it, they've definitely gotten a way lower price point than everyone else on how they're organizing this World Cup. And it's because they've kind of collectivized to find the best way around it. And if something goes badly, like, you know, the Scots are all going to pull their kilts up and we're going to see a bunch of butts on TV, Braveheart style or something. It'll be amazing. and people will talk about it, right? Like, but yeah, the most important thing is that it's that collective action. It's that collective action having a purpose about it. Like, what have you seen the American Outlaws do to try and improve the footballing system in this country? To nothing. They just kind of make everyone feel a little bit embarrassed about their own supporter section. And like, no offense to anyone who's part of the group, like, I'm curious to know, like, is there something going on? We had the international supporter, the ISC, they've got the shield that you win that will only belong to the fans, and then Infantino magically made it away for Messi to qualify for the African, for the Club World Cup. So I don't know, but I think that collective organizing as fans and seeing your football team as your sports team as a means to build deeper community that then branches out into other things in life means that you can then affect change in football. But like, so long as it's this hyper individualistic route, we're destined for this.
Thank you guys so much. I'm gonna volley it over to the audience real quick. I think we have time for one question. Okay. Oh, wow, this is tough. Yep. Yeah, you? Oh, that was loud, sorry. I think Will's gonna bring a mic. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, guys. Ooh, let me hold it here. Can you guys hear me? All right. Thank you guys so much. I have like a lot of notes, and so I'm gonna try to corral them into one question that makes sense. You spoke about how FIFA was created, you know, obviously in a post-World War II era where countries were, you know, competing against each other. It's obviously kind of symbolic in that way. And you also spoke very beautifully about the Algerian national team and how they cultivated this sort of national identity through football, through international football and playing it. And I wanted to think about that more today. In the world that we live in, and you guys touched on this for sure, like every 4 years, the World Cup comes and it's met with criticism, like migrant rights right now. Obviously, I'm Somali, so to me it feels like the biggest story in the world, this referee situation. I'm sure it's not, but like right now, like this World Cup that doesn't actually welcome the world. And I guess my question is, in the 21st century where we don't have this same sort of world where it's not in the same spirit of post-World War II competitiveness and nationalism. And I think a lot of people actually chafe against nationalism for the 4-year cycle until the World Cup comes again, and then they dive back into it. I'm curious about what it actually means when Africa wins, when we beat our former colonizers like Spain and Morocco in 2022, for example, which I cried and it had nothing to do with me, but how does it matter, or does it actually matter at all? And what does that mean like today? So yeah, I hope that was a question, or I don't know if I was just talking.
I mean, I'll say a quick thing. So I wrote like a post about this the other day, and I think I was too optimistic about what does it mean for Africa. So the Chimamanda Adichie, who I will disagree with on 100 things, has this one argument where she says that your nationalism expands as the World Cup. As an African, it expands, because you said this is a thing organized our nations. So it expands as the World Cup goes on. So you start, sorry, I know Somali never qualified, but let's say you identify with Nigeria. So then Nigeria loses, then you put your support in like another team as the tournament goes on. And generally, you know, Ghana in the 2010 Bagana, or like Morocco classic, like Qatar was really, you're right, it's for real. You're like, oh, snap, that's us. You know what I'm saying? But there's an argument to be made that that's less the case now, that might not be the case with this World Cup. And partly, I don't know if everybody's been following what's been going on in South Africa, where there's this turn to the right among the black majority in South Africa, very xenophobic. It's not even xenophobic, it's xenophobia against other Africans from the rest of the continent. And so you see this kind of social media stuff where this is the first time where you'll see tweets by people. One, they make jokes, which is like, they'll put on a hat and music is playing, and then they start like dancing to a mariachi band, and they're from like Kenya, and they like trying to say, I'm rooting for Mexico against South Africa. So there's that level. It's jokey, but it's actually a very powerful thing that I don't think that same kind of your Pan-Africanism stretches as the tournament keeps going. And I mean, of course, mine still does, but I don't think like the same courtesy that a South African was given, like, I don't know, maybe a decade ago, is going to be happening with this World Cup. I think a lot of Africans are going to be rooting against South Africa. Not just because there's these old Nigerians in South Africa, they always kind of like vie over who's like, the biggest and the best and all that stuff. I get that, that's part of it, but I think that this Pan-Africanism that we used to have is not there. We talked about like whether it's possible for certain kinds of continental political action happening. It's more divided. People are more siphoned off by various different interests. So mine is a very pessimistic answer to like, what does that mean? I'm not sure if that ethos might still be around anymore.
Just to add to that, because I mean, I think for a lot of us, our best day ever at the World Cup was Senegal beating France, right? I was just going through the team sheets the other day and going like, interesting thing here was that the key holding the French midfield together was Patrick Vieira, who's born in Dakar. So, and then you come back to what Trevor Noah said after the last World Cup. This is a victory for Africa, right? After the 2018. And the French ambassador in New York, whatever, is like, how dare you deny their Frenchness? It's like, yeah, you're only accepting their Frenchness because they won, because we know that if they'd lost, you would be, yeah. But it's much more complicated. Like, I mean, if France plays Senegal now, like most of the people in blue are actually Francophone African, like represented somehow. So, I mean, maybe, I don't know. It's not as simple as the nation states, I think, as Sean's saying.
So I guess, yeah, with that, we'd like to bring it to a close. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Africa's Country. And yeah, I think there are a couple other panels after hours, so please do stick around.
Yeah, thank you very much to Achille, to Martino, to Tony, to Sean. We've got another panel in this room coming up. If you want to kind of take 5 minutes to stretch your legs, go to the bathroom, and then in 5 minutes, please do come here for our next exciting panel. So thank you, everyone. All right. Everybody could start kind of coming back to their seats and settling down. We are ready to start our next panel. All right. Has everyone found their seat, had a chance to stretch, gone to the bathroom? Okay, excellent. Thank you, everyone, for remaining on this journey with us. Thanks once again to Achille, Martino, Sean, and Tony for the previous panel. If you haven't yet grabbed an issue of our second print edition ever, please do. Many of the issues and themes and threads that were unraveled in the previous panel, I'm sure in this one as well, some of those are also taken up in the print edition. So pick one up, pick a couple up, distribute some to your friends, to family, to colleagues, to whoever. Read it, give us feedback. We're very excited about what we've put together. There are some amazing contributors in that, and so we're very proud. So please don't forget before the evening winds down to grab an issue. And now we are on to our next panel in this room for the evening, which is on the question of what a decolonized football looks like. So in many ways, the journey we've been walking, the first panel was kind of diagnosis of, what is the problem? How has that problem sort of been challenged throughout history? How have people tried to combat the corruption and the hypocrisy and the inadequacy of international sport and the way it's governed and the way it's organized? Now this panel is sort of maybe going to be trying to broaden our horizons into asking, football, despite all of these contradictory histories that it has, all of these contradictory presence that it has, remains this profound source of resonance and inspiration and emotion for a lot of people. And so it's not something that we can simply cast to the side, because in many ways it is an opportunity to rehearse different visions of the future. And so this panel is going to be unpacking that to some extent. And we've got a very esteemed gathering of individuals with us. We have Anna, Olimpia, Moura, Leite, Akindes, Noor, Ahmad, as well as Brenda, Elsey. And Anna, who's going to be moderating for us this evening, is a PhD student at the New School for Social Research and is a director at Elsey Consultores in Brazil. And she's interested in the intersection of economics, culture, and football. So Anna, we're in good hands, and a very warm welcome and thank you to all four of you. Okay.
Thank you so much. So before asking each one of you to introduce yourself to the audience, I would just like to state that Sean was thinking that France will win this championship, the World Cup. I will say that maybe not. So coming from Brazil, I will let you know that we are not optimistic, and usually we are, but this time we aren't. But I will say that Spain might have a chance. Let's see. So please, Simone and everyone, if you could introduce yourself.
Good evening, everybody. In the place where I come from, when you say good evening, you expect an answer. Good evening, everybody. All right. So about Sean and the possibility that France is going to win the World Cup, I would like to disagree, and to disagree very strongly, because always the same teams. France is going to win, and then Anna is talking, she said Brazil, she's saying Spain. It seems as if we can't get rid of this colonial mind. So I'm going to stop here. I mean, to present myself, I'm a professor of political science at the University of Wisconsin, Parkside. I have retired. So for those of you who are starting, good luck. I wish you the best. And then my work has always been about politics, but politics as related to music, sports, and literature. So, because I think that those are the places where things happen, and the important things, I would say.
My name is Noor, and I'm a lawyer. I'm also a Palestinian. I'm a football fan, and I started a project called Lifta Club, which is really a preservation society. And it's rooted in the place that my family comes from, which is called Lifta. It used to be a part of Jerusalem, and then in 1948, you know, the lines were drawn, and my family was ethnically displaced. So the project, though, really is about possibility and imagination. I started it because I don't want us to be living in 1948 always. I don't want us to be living in just, you know, like pure sadness and tragedy, because that's not what Palestinians are about. I believe that we will be free and we will be liberated. And this project is about telling our stories, the stories that aren't told, and also really about like imagining a future. Part of what we did with me, a good friend of mine that's here, and another collaborator, was create a jersey. And the question we asked before we made it was, if Lifta was still here, what would we imagine this jersey to be? And this to us was like such a beautiful project that we all got to do together. We used real places, like my great grandfather's vegetable market, a cafe where, you know, our families used to go as the sponsors. And anyway, so in part we talk about football because it's something we love, and to honor the past, but also really about imagining what a future could look like. Oh,
Hi, good evening. Does it? Oh, thank you. I'm Brenda Elsey. I'm a professor of history at Hofstra University. I also am the co-host of a feminist sports podcast called Burn It All Down. So thank you. That's really nice. We love you, flamethrowers. You heard the title, so if you haven't listened to it, it tells you everything you need to know. I also work with the FAIR Network, where I run the Americas program. So right now, we have anonymous experts and observers that will try to document discriminatory behavior from all of the fans in this World Cup. We are independent from FIFA, and yes. It's complicated. It's a situationship because, of course, you need certain types of accreditations and things like that, right, to protect observers. But it is where you see, for example, the P chant when fines come for the homophobic chant that Mexican fans find. That's because an expert has been there, has documented the chant, and that goes for a lot of racial discrimination, misogyny, xenophobia. Sometimes it's Brazilians, for example, ripping up Argentine money and pesos in front of Argentines, which we classify as xenophobia, for example. So that just gives you a sense, but also like chants, banners, stuff like that. So that's who I am. Thank you, everyone. So to start, I would like to start with Simon. How are you, Simon? About what for you is the definition of decolonizing football. And it's interesting to be here one day before the World Cup starting in this country, which the last panel talked a lot about all the complexities. And Brazil hosted the World Cup, just to make a point before. Brazil hosted the World Cup in 2014. At that time, I was working in the municipality of São Paulo, which was one of the city hosting the World Cup. So I saw from the side of the government how FIFA would enforce all their laws. So Brazil had to change most of their laws to host this event, this major event, and Brazil did it all. And the stadiums changed it. The characteristic of our stadium were totally became an arena, and this played a big role in what came afterwards for the clubs, that for the club's fans. So yeah, being here one day before the World Cup for you, Simon, what do you think is the meaning of decolonizing football? If that, if we can hope about that in a certain way, and also if you could develop on for you what this decolonizing football could look like.
Well, I don't think that I would be able to tell you, because most of you are probably more intelligent than I am and probably more creative than I am. I don't think I'll be able to tell you what decolonized football can be or would look like. But what I can tell you for sure at this point is what our football looks like. My question started from this: why is it that the same teams keep winning everything? We're talking about a World Cup that had its first edition in 1950. We are now 76 years beyond that edition, and it is always the same teams that are winning this World Cup. What does it mean? What world are we in? What world have we created for people, for the same people to do the same thing all the time? That is the World Cup. I'm sure most of you or some of you are also fans of Arsenal, fans of Man City, and so on and so forth. Why is it that in Spain, when it is not Arsenal winning, it is, when it is not Barcelona winning, it is Real Madrid? Why is it that for the past 15 years in Germany, Bayern has won the league 13 times? In France, PSG wins the thing even before the league starts. So this is very problematic for me. It is very problematic. So my query here is to understand why. Because I've been in many parts of this world, and there is no way I can say. And I've been a football player myself. I had the opportunity to play in the National University of Benin, where I come from, all right? And then I know what it is for me to play football. When I step onto the field, it is not because necessarily I want Benin to win. When I step onto the field, it's for my joy. It's for the beautiful gesture that I'm going to have, that I'm going to display, and that the spectators are going to like, and they're just going to start jumping in the field. So that is what gives me joy. So the question about decolonizing football relies, if you want, around the idea of creating conditions for people like you and like me, and people in the communities, people in every single area that plays football, the conditions for them to play and to enjoy and to love what they do. The nationalist sentiments are going to be recuperated probably by politicians. They are very good at that. So that started from there. And my answer to that question is simply that it is in the structures. It is in the colonial structures that were already established and that are still prevalent today. It is in the financial networks that we are still using today that were created 100 years ago. It is in the investment that were made. It is in the land that was taken at some point, for very specific project, and that deprived people like you and me, I'm not sure, at least people like me, from playing. So until there is a reversal and until there is a change, I do not see how football is going to be decolonized. We are in a situation where, I mean, in the 70s and 80s, when I started political science, we were talking about the dependency theory. And I'm sure some of you are exposed to that dependency theory and then the modernization theory. They were competing in those days. We are in a situation where now there is more dependency than there used to be. Maybe it is debatable, but there is. And now with what is happening today in the geopolitical world, where people are going out again and say, well, we're going to come after you. You have land, you have wealth on your land, you have minerals on your land. We're going to make a deal with you. A deal with you is coming to you and telling you, this is what we want. If you don't want that, there is no deal, and then we can do whatever we want of you. So this is the world in which we inhabit. It is a world in which there is so much inequality. In the past 50 years or so or more, since the Second World War, we have allowed too few people to have so much power, so much money, that they can control everything. So if this does not change, I'm not sure how the football is going to be decolonized. Football is just a big window. It's a big window. It is important because you get to televise a game and then millions of people are watching it. It's a big window for those who have money to tell you what they want, to get into your head, to get into your psyche, you know. And as a result of that, we are all wired, and then we keep going and we keep going, and things are not changing. So those were the things. And now about how it's going to look like and things like that, maybe we can talk about a little bit more about that. What I'm saying here is what should be done. FIFA, the big monster is there. I don't know. Is it dinosaur? Are we going to wait for the night dinosaur to die, or are we going to just help the dinosaur die? I don't know. And other things, you know. But I can talk about that a little bit later.
Okay, thank you so much. So in your perspective, you mainly, like summing up, you say that we have been moving to more concentration, the same teams winning the same time when we talk about clubs, and when we talk about national teams, it seems that the pattern is also showing up. And I will even, if let's see if you agree, Simon, on that, but I'll even say that the thing that, for example, as a Brazil team is not doing that well is because of that, like because the concentration is moving forward. So most of our players are going to Europe, and we are like, to be like we are having more and more of the same kind of player that is the one that are the more like from the, you know, like Hendrik, Esteban, they all play in the same side of the field, and we don't have like the midfielders, we don't have the defenders. So that's something that will make our national teams worse, because we are exporting our players and one type of player. So just to make a point here, and if anyone wants to add, that would be great. But from what we have prepared, I would like to move forward with Brenda. Brenda, first of all, of course, if you'd like to comment on what Simon said, but we were also talking about different perspectives of decolonization, and one of that would be related with gender. So Brenda, as you all know, and she has a strong background on history, written a bunch of books, interesting books about women's football in South America. And so I was thinking about what to ask to you, and I thought how the gender perspective is put in this colonial theory, how the man's sports, the man practice is seen in our imaginary and top standard than the woman, and the woman is always set aside, and we will always think that it's more interesting, it's more, you know, like powerful, the man than the woman, while things seems to be changing. So I would like to see a very slowly, but it seems to. Last Sunday, the stadium of Corinthians was full of people receiving the U.S. team against the Brazilian team, and the coach of the U.S. team was like, "Oh, these people are loud. Like, we are not. You guys are feeling for the first time in your life a real pressure from the crowd." So it seems like things are changing a little bit. So my question to you is, do you have hope on a change? And what, I'm sorry, what from the history of women football would you think that how things have evolved, what we have learned about it, and if you have hope from this broader perspective as well?
Thank you. Thank you for organizing us, and thanks for being my fellow panelists too in here. So if you were depressed before, I'm your resident feminist killjoy. I don't have hope that the Men's World Cup is going to advance any causes of feminism. Quite the opposite. So we heard on the last panel, and the last panel was funny and wonderful and smart, and I know those people's work and I respect it so much. So funny. At the same time, they asked us to imagine how football helps material things come into being by imagining them. A lot of people use writers like Eduardo Galeano to really feel that romantic connection to that past beautiful football. That book has 0 women. No, wait, maybe somebody's sewing a uniform. So that imagination that was supposed to rethink Latin America at the beginning of the 21st century is totally absent of women. And I would say that's intentional. That's a fun place for him to think about. It's a place where he can control people's leisure, time, body. And that's representative of what FIFA does as well. So it's top down and bottom up. My only hope comes from the very vibrant Ni Una Menos movement in Latin America that has worked with the publicly owned clubs still or whatever, and there's a lot of problems with that. We could talk about that. And the push to privatize has a lot to do with the activity of those feminists within the clubs like Boca Juniors. And so they've done a lot of stuff to make the stadium safe, to try to combat sexual violence. Players from the Colombian team, from the Haitian team, all over have really tried to register complaints with FIFA, with police, about the way in which they're treated. I mean, these are really like models for the wider society. So that's where, I don't want to go on too long, really, but I think that's where the hope really is right now, is kind of the pushback against privatization, which joins young women and men who are feminists as well, and also the OG clubs that just don't want to be privately owned. So you can go to like a River Plate meeting. It's a wild situation if you go to the Gender Commission, right? Because you've got people pushing for inclusion, for non-binary, for trans athletes. You have the first trans footballer coming out of the Argentine system, and they're sitting next to, unks of every type. And, and they're pushing for racial inclusion, and they're pushing for decolonization. And these things are all intersecting in those spaces. But we're not going to see that at the Men's World Cup. We're going to see men making $900 million, and the Women's World Cup will make $100 million. And that's all you need to know about how they value women, women fans, women media people, and definitely women players.
I'm going to try to be slightly more positive, though I'm with both of you on this stuff. Like, when we were talking about decolonization, I think that Palestine actually is going to play a huge part in this World Cup. We may not have qualified, and we were very close to qualifying, but I think we're going to see Palestine at this World Cup, right? We're going to see flags everywhere. And I think in part it's because of the tragedy of what we've witnessed for the last few years. We've had like more than 400 footballers that were murdered during a genocide. And FIFA has said nothing. We have had, you know, there is a stadium in Gaza that was turned into a detention center where people were interrogated and unlawfully detained. And then that stadium was bulldozed deliberately, right? Because football means so much to Palestinians and to people in Palestine and in Gaza. And yet, despite it all, Palestinians are playing, right? There are like military checkpoints and there are visa bans, and the inability to actually play is so prohibitive, and yet they're playing and they almost qualified for this World Cup. I think that's extraordinary. And I think because of FIFA's basic complicity in what's happening and how egregious what's happening, it's gonna be part of the unraveling, in my opinion. I do think change is coming because it's so awful, right? Like, it's just not sustainable. You know, there are 10 settlement clubs, Israeli clubs that are playing in settlements in Palestine. That's unlawful land. That is land that was stolen from Palestinians. And yet these clubs exist. And in 2013, the Palestinian Federation raised a complaint. And for the last, 13 years? I can't do the math. They basically punted, right? They have avoided the question. They've like created committees. They've done all this stuff to just avoid answering the question. And yet in 2024, the International Criminal Court of Justice, you know, in their advisory opinion, has said the settlements are unlawful, they're illegal. And so, you know, in March 2026, FIFA came out and decided to finally answer the complaint that the Palestinians brought about these unlawful settlement clubs. And the answer was neutrality. It's too complex. We can't resolve this. And I just think that's like, the neutrality is a legal fiction. It's just not gonna hold up at a certain point. You know, in this country, desegregation didn't just happen overnight, right? Like, it took 14 years with the same fact pattern over and over and over again before we got to a decision in 1954. And I just think the law is never going to be the answer when it comes to decolonization or solving things. But we're seeing it, and I think the culture is there and the solidarity is there. So I just think it's inevitable. Change is inevitable.
Well, I would say that change is inevitable. The only question is when and how. When I take football in Africa today, a player, in Latin America, it is the same thing. Brazil, the same thing, the handbrakes, what's this other young guy, Vinicius and all those guys, you know, they are very quickly, you know, taken away. So even before some of them become, you know, stars, if I should speak so, even before they become stars, they are taken away because of the promise that they have. And then the system works in such a way that most of the talented players are siphoned very early into the elite of world football. The elite of world football, you find them in the leagues, but every 4 years, we come to a certain degree to worship that elite of football. You know, you understand what I mean? They take everything away, and then every 4 years we come and celebrate them, you know. And at the same time, those players, they don't have, I don't know if the system that builds them that way, most of them don't have the consciousness that they can change anything. They don't seem to believe that they have any power. You know, they get there, what do? They do what every rich folk does. They buy the most expensive cars that you can think about. They have private jets and things like that. Those players actually represent the site where change can happen, but they are the ones that are controlled. Now, for us, the fans, you know, I'm going to watch some games. I may not like everything. I'm going to watch some games, you know. But the reason why I'm going to watch games is because I played for a long time in many different places. That's one thing. The second thing is that I like when the game is beautiful. And then there is this emotional thing. When France is playing Senegal, I'm not from Senegal, but my country was colonized by the French. I'm happy that the Senegalese win the game. So there is this emotional connection that I have with football that has nothing to do with how power is necessarily distributed. So this is what is happening today. And then what I believe is that there's another factor. You know, in the late 80s and early 90s, there were structural adjustment programs in Africa. So there was an effort to convince governments that they should not be part of the whole thing. So what happened? FIFA came up and said, well, you government people, you are so corrupt. We don't want you to do anything with football anymore. Football has to be controlled by the people themselves. And the people that they thought would control the game were the people that they installed and put in place through a number of things. One of the things is the money they give federations. If you are the president of a federation and you go against FIFA, then maybe you are working against your own people because you're not going to get the money. So we have learned, so the structural adjustment programs, what they have done for us, it is not just that they pointed out one of the flaws in the system, but they completely restructured our way of thinking. So you come tell Africans, and I'm sure some of you here are Africans, you come tell Africans that what they need is privatization. We're talking about private, but we know more than anybody what private means. You know, the hairdresser, the mechanic, the tailor, all those guys, they are doing private business and they've been doing it for generations. And then you tell us, and then we, the elite, we say, oh, we need privatization, you know, we need to get foreign investment. And we keep doing the same thing and the same thing again and again. And then things do not get better. In football, it is the same thing. The state of African football is miserable. I'm sorry, but this is the term I have for it. It is miserable. It is so miserable that we Africans recognize it, and then we create CHAN. So for players who do not go outside and play. And when it's the World Cup, we bring all those players who go outside and play. So what are we doing? So those are very important things that we need to talk about. So what a decolonized football for me would be that the state should reclaim its part in the development of sport in our countries. The country that I have in mind is, as an example for that, is Cuba. Cuba, in terms of sports, had been a very successful country. 10 million people or 12. No, now everybody's going out, so it's 9 million now. Small country like Benin, but this is a country that goes to the Olympics and in many different sports. They don't do football, but in many different sports, they gather medals that we don't gather. They can gather medals more medals than some powerful African countries, especially before Kenya, Ethiopia started winning the long distance, simply because sport is funded by the state, is organized by the state. They train people that are working for the development of their players, and they have a constant renewal of talented. I don't like talents too much, because When you use talent, we think that there are talent somewhere in Africa, in a corner, in a village, and then we need to go and get them. We need to find them and get them. There are systems in place in every country to, if you want, train people. Even if playing in the street is a form of learning how to play. So the state has to be part of it, and then we need to stop believing that private money is going to solve our problems. So that's what decolonized football will mean for me. One of the things.
Thank you. I would like to keep on this topic and then ask Brenda. Then I will get to you, Noor, again. But ask Brenda on your thoughts on that, considering we were talking before the panel started about Getúlio Vargas, that was a dictator in Brazil, and what happened then. You could tell people
You want
about
me to talk
it.
about the prohibition of
Yeah.
women's football?
And because thinking
Okay.
about the government, like there's pros and cons, and
Right.
those things could, like we could balance those issues. So it would be good to bring the
Right.
perspective from.
Well, not all states are created equal, right? You might want one kind of state to run a program, and maybe that is the Cuban state. And I read a lot about how Negro League players actually went back to Cuba and played a central part of deprofessionalizing baseball in Cuba. So they actually had an experience of being extracted, had an experience in professional baseball, said this is abysmal, this is horrible, came back and helped to dismantle it. So, so let's not lose all hope in players maybe that have left. I don't know yet, but Vinny is certainly trying what he can do. Those players are extracted from clubs like Flamengo Academy, where a fire killed 10 boys in 2019. These are horribly exploitative places. We certainly could not tell him to stay there. Like, you know what I mean? So it's obvious why one would leave after that kind of you know what I mean? That kind of experience. And it was because the state didn't intervene, so to your point, because there was a faulty air conditioner that they had been cited for about 1 million times by the Rio government. They ignored it, caught fire, and yes, they were lucky, only 10 died, and it's horrible. And then they tried to give them contracts to shut the family up, to give them short-term contracts. So we could talk about those exploitative systems that are extracted that look like colonialism, right? You extract Brazil and Argentina, export more players than any other country except France, which is second. And it's extraction, absolutely. How do you ameliorate it? I think the point you were making is that some states don't do it the way you would like. And you were bringing up Getúlio Vargas in the Brazilian state, which after the Women's Professional League had formed in Brazil in 1939, went on to be so disgusted with the success of the Brazilian women, including a match which they opened in Estadio Pacaembu, which is the municipal stadium in Sao Paulo. And they played in front of Getúlio Vargas, the dictator. And the dictator formed a council, and the following week they banned women's football for the next 40 years. Not just regulation play. This isn't like nice British people. Any play, anywhere. Your backyard, your birthday party, your beach, your university. Everything was a public space, and it was totally banned. And so I think to that point, right? I mean, what kind of state do you want to have running it is kind of a central one. I just want to say, like, in the United States currently, where we are, where this cup is happening, where ICE is terrorizing fans and making it incredibly difficult for them to organize or even have any fun or feel safe at all, we could think, a little bit about how pay to play has actually worked in conjunction with U.S. Soccer Federation's complicit behavior towards this a little bit as well. So there's a kind of colonization, but then we look at a country like the U.S. with all this money, and the privatization continues to make this kind of politics our reality here. So I don't know. I don't think we should go much longer without saying ICE.
Yes.
So basically, that's it.
Yes, and that's not because I don't agree. Just to make it clear, um, currently in Brazil, a lot of clubs, a lot of teams are going through privatization, and the one that I'm fan is Palmeiras. We're not in this situation, but I am in a group of fans that organize and are making debates about it because we know it will get into our team because they sell this idea that privatization is the solution, which we know there are a lot of consequences, and the concentration of the leaders is, I think, is the one that Simon highlighted. And Simon, just another note on the government side, there's I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. What I've read about it is that King of Spain, he was like, oh, something is going wrong in our football league. Like, we just have to, like Barcelona and Real Madrid, that's not, that's not interesting. And Premier League is doing a good job and having, a very great audience, and they are winning like most of the three leagues in Europe, not only the Champions League but the other ones that from the and most of the winners, like the mid and lower side teams, are winning all those championships. And the Champions League, we will have Arsenal coming, after a long time, going to the final. So the King of Spain was like, we need to make a change in here. And one of the thoughts was like to, mimic what the Premier League is doing and better distribute all the rent from the television broadcasting. So yeah, we can go back to this topic, or I don't know if you want to talk more about it.
What I would say is this. The US is an example sometimes when it comes to the NBA and American football. The same teams don't dominate all the time, because when they have the draft, the worst team picks the best player. And then also there is a salary cap. So somebody must intervene in this system in the world for things to change. In the case of football, there's nothing. Manchester City, especially when free money, I would say, is coming from the Gulf states, Manchester City, for about 10 years or 15 years, they have established some kind of monopoly, because they can get the best players. Recently, for example, when the season was a little bit wobbling for them, they decided to go and buy Gay from Crystal Palace, and they also bought Semenyo from Bournemouth. And very quickly, the season was revived. So this is the type of thing, we have allowed too much inequality to take roots. We protect it. And then the result is that we create all these asymmetrical situations where a team like, let's say, Nottingham Forest or maybe West Ham, the only thing they can do is to compete. They compete 20 years, maybe after 22 years, like Arsenal, they're going to get a cup once. And then every time they come back and they come back and they come back. So if there is some way of regulating this, I think things can change. This is what I think. Now, governments can be problematic, just the way private organizations can be very problematic. So there must be, if you want, a regime of controls that are put in place to try to mitigate the effect of free free decision making, especially by those who have plenty of money. I'm sure you know the power of money, don't you? I'm sure you know that when a lot of money comes to your door, you look at it in a different way, right? So this is the type of thing that is happening in football. And unfortunately, in our countries, we are doing the same thing. We are not organizing, we are not developing the players, and then we rely on somebody who has money to come and solve our problems. But in Africa, you know, very recently, the state has intervened. If you take the case of Morocco, that I don't know very, very much, but the case of Morocco, for example, the state has intervened in the football. They have funded a lot of things and whatever, and then it is a little bit better. You know, if you take Senegal, there is more investment in football by the government. So more oversight. So those things for me can bring about some change, but doesn't mean that it is going to happen necessarily because it is the state, because the state is also a source of. Or you don't have one. Oh, you don't have one, yes. You know, so that's what I think about this football in which we are.
It seems to me that we have to move on the side of the resistance and to make this, even if it's better if it's a government, because then resistance is more effective than it's a private entity. And so, Noor, I would like to move to you and ask first for you to talk more about the Leite Club. And you already started, but putting also onto the perspective of resistance, considering your legal background and how you will mix and balance all of it together as the Leite Club as a source of resistance to Palestine, the legal exemptions that are being made, and also what these could, you know, translate to football, but not only football.
Look, I don't know. I mean, I think for Palestine, resistance is coming in all sorts of ways, right? You have, I mean, the hope is that more players are going to speak out. You know, some have, like Anwar al-Ghazi, he may not be a superstar, but he did speak out and he was actually terminated, right? And what we are seeing is that people are circumventing FIFA and the CAS, and he went to German labor court, and it was about his unlawful termination for his speech, right? He tweeted about Palestine and his solidarity, and he won, and they appealed, and he won again. So, like I said, I don't think law is ever going to be the answer, or, you know, it's going to get us where we need to get, but I think people being courageous and willing to talk about it and circumvent when they do have the access, I think it's important. I think it is happening. I think we're seeing it. We were talking about this earlier. You know, this World Cup is really scary for all the reasons you're saying, like people being afraid of ICE, this horrible administration. But we also live in this city right now that's being run by someone who cares about affordability, who cares about access, who's going to make the World Cup about this city. And that is exciting, right? And maybe there is an opportunity there. And let's see, like, I think we don't know what's going to happen. I think some of it is going to be dark. We've talked about it. But maybe we're going to see some courageous things. And maybe we're going to see in this sort of horrible climate that there will be some bravery and there will be some courage, right? And I think that's what resistance can look like, is actually just speaking out and talking about it and being brave enough. I don't know, you know, like I don't have the answers. I just know that there's a shift. What we've seen in the last few years, we can't unsee. We can't go back. And it is intertwined and interwoven with this sport that we all love. I mean, I don't think I answered your question, but that's all I have.
Maybe you want to run for FIFA president or Simone. You know it's coming up. You can write all the petitions against Infantino, but you can also run against him. So there's one thing to sort of say, well, let's keep criticizing the same cycle, the same exhaustion, the same grueling 4 years, 48 teams. We're going to be exhausted. If there's bravery, we'll be excited for a while, and that's awesome, but we're still going to be exhausted. So we can sign all the things and complain all we want, and FIFA's counting on you doing that. FIFA's counting on you being tired and having all the events and all the op-eds and all the things, and I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing them, but they're counting on you getting so exhausted that you don't do anything else, like run for FIFA president, which really isn't that hard. Just need some signatures. Grant Wall tried it. Rest in peace, my friend from Qatar. We were there together in 2022. He tried it. It started conversations. You might not win, but you might make some good trouble. So I'm just putting that out there. I've also asked the other panelists in the other room, like Laurent Dubois, to run for FIFA president. So you're like first choices, obviously, but I'm just saying people have to step up to do governance. You have to understand what a confederation is, what an association is, how these things work, or else you're never going to get there. Like I read this stuff about the Iranian team not being given their ticket allocation. I love Al Jazeera, right? But it says U.S. denies Iran their ticket allocation. The U.S. doesn't do that. FIFA does that. That's that 8%. So be precise. You know what I mean? Like, know who you're going after in governance. Read the regulations, And I know there's not enough support for journalists, and I'm sorry to be blah, blah, blah. So I'll stop there, but run for president of FIFA, please.
Sure.
And U.S. Soccer Federation, because they've said zero about immigration and safety.
No, that's great. I will not stop you from talking.
You too.
Brenda.
You can run.
So
I'd be happy.
And you made me remember even the group that I mentioned that I'm part of it. It's not, if anyone from Brazil is here. So it's Ocupa Palestra. We started as a fan group, but we now have 5, 6 consuls in our club. And our idea was exactly that. Like, we know how easy it was for them to, like they blocked all the streets that the fans used to make, all like to watch the game and do all the party. And we were like, oh, we have to have a kind of resistance to make things more difficult. But it's hard. It's really hard. But yeah, so, and Simon, back to your point about the government, something that I was also remembering and thinking about is the ticket prices. And for example, in Brazil, 400,000 tickets were separated for the local population. So we was, enough affordable. It was around, for today's money, was around $20, which is kind of like, wow, like we have to face $1,000, and compared to the NBA games, it seems that the World Cup is even cheap in the reality of the United States. So it seems that for the United States, the government doesn't, push for a regulation on the ticket for the big events, for what it means, for what football, what basketball for the New Yorkers represents for the culture of the place. So if you'd like to talk about that, about the tickets, and then I will open a Q&A. Yeah.
Well, the tickets, I mean, it's part of the same ecosystem, right? We have to drive money. Wherever we can get it, we have to drive it up. We have to follow it up. So the tickets are pricey for us, but corporations buy tickets for the employees and so on and so forth, and the money is flowing, But somebody has to protect the public good. That's what is lacking, and it is lacking not only at that level, but it is lacking at our own lower levels. I'm going to take the case of Senegal, for example. A friend of mine, I haven't done any research about that, so please forgive me, okay? A friend of mine has told me that in Dakar now, everybody is using artificial turf and creating a small spot to play football. And then to play, you have to pay. So it is at the level of the people. But we're always talking about looking for talents and things. If more people don't play, where are you going to find the talents? And the people who have money, that's not necessarily their problem, because the kids are going to maybe come to Harvard, or they're going to go to some place and they're going to get completely, enrolled in the system. So those little kids who cannot play and who need to play, how are they going to do it? We have to think about that. And if we don't think about that, nothing is going to happen. I remember when I was around 15, 16, there was a young boy in my neighborhood. He was so good, he was so excellent. There was no structure to pull him up. And then eventually that young boy, he committed suicide. You know why? Because his mother had another man in her life. And that was enough for that young kid to commit suicide. So if we do not support, if we do not create at those levels, the structures for people to express themselves, to be what they are, to make a decent life, we're not solving any problem. And if we can do that, the whole resistance is there. Maybe, I don't know, we had to go to Qatar to understand that, for example, you have to have a break because it is hot. I had been playing in the street in Benin in temperatures of 30 to 32. Nobody's said ever that you have to have a break to hydrate. We have to go to Qatar before these things to happen. It means that we are not thinking right. So we have to create conditions to think right and to think independently. And that's enough for resistance to happen.
So please, we want you to ask questions, and just to let you all know that Brenda has to leave in 10 minutes. So
She is a single parent.
one
round of questions, maybe. Yeah.
This is maybe a statement that could also be a question, but you were talking about running for president of FIFA, which I have no interest in doing, because I think FIFA should just die.
Best way to kill it.
Yeah, I'm
for president.
Well, look what they've done to this country. So I'm kind of just wondering where the shift in the ideation of like what FIFA has become, because FIFA used to be this thing people were afraid of, that had this like authority. Like when I was watching a documentary the other night when they had the World Cup here in '94. Like, also, how the fuck is Don Garber still in control?
Right.
I don't know. They lied about how many tickets they were selling to drive up the demand and basically impress FIFA that they would have full stadiums. In like the one line that stuck out to me at the end of it, they're like, "Oh, Don was mad that we didn't charge more," and I was like, "Oh, well, this is their revenge right now, is driving the prices up on us." And then I think it was, you look down to Brazil, what they did to these like beautiful architectural sites of stadiums. They destroyed them to make them festival, like Coachellas for soccer, essentially, because that's what FIFA demanded of them, and they bowed down to it. Russia had the World Cup, and they paid off and banished all like the CSKA Moscow and Lokomotiv Moscow hooligans to just go fight somewhere else for a month. So where the question comes in, maybe just the anger comes in, is how did this shift so quickly to like, there's no, like, for instance, you were saying Al Jazeera was wrong, which maybe they are, of like the US didn't deny the tickets, FIFA did. And I'm like, I don't know. I think the US held the proverbial gun to FIFA and it's like, you do what we say, or, so I'm like, how is this happening? Like, because FIFA could just as easily, for instance, 2023, Indonesia, whether, I'm sure everybody agrees with me here, but whatever, there's a U20 tournament. Indonesia's like, we're not letting in the Israeli team because there are actual IDF soldiers here in their team. It took 3 days, and they were like tournaments in Argentina, and they moved it down to Argentina. So they do have that power to make these really economically, and again, Indonesia got a tournament. I think it was a U19. Oh, well, somebody finally asked the question.
Today, and he said it's complicated.
So, but it's like they had a U19 tournament that they gave to them a year later because Israel wasn't taking part in it. So it's not like there's not workarounds to be made or compromises. It's just why this is open, and I don't know if there's an answer. Why is everybody so afraid of Trump? He's a fucking idiot falling asleep at a basketball game. Like, what are we doing here? He doesn't own the sport. It's ours. I just don't. I don't know. I don't know if it's a question. I'm sorry. It's just.
Well, he's at the behest of a very violent state machine and militarized police force that terrorizes parts of this country on the regular. So as buffoonish as he is, the result can be really real for real people. And I mean, but I hear you. Like, I mean, I feel your frustration. Why are people afraid of FIFA is because they still do hold power, like an 8% ticket allocation. And Al Jazeera is not wrong to say FIFA is in bed with the US government. And I totally get those reporters. What I'm saying is, if you want to undo something like that relies upon a governance system, which is intentionally fucked up and intentionally beyond what you can comprehend because it's not rational, you still have to know it. Because if you want those tickets back, the US government doesn't have them. But FIFA does. I just got tickets on my app today, as probably many of you did. You know what I mean? So they can app those tickets to the Iranian delegation like that. But if you go asking the US government for it, because it's kind of sloppy, you know what I mean? You're not going to get them back. So that was my only point. Not that they aren't completely in bed with each other, but only that, like, to get something actually reversed, you have to, like, know. It's like city politics.
That just started like the shift. How it's
Yeah.
fully back out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But I think Martino made a great point earlier, and I don't know if he's still here, about, there you go, about, like, 78, Mussolini, like, they have always loved a dictator, and so the U.S. is more like that. I think FIFA is more the same, and the U.S. is more like that, maybe. Anyway, other people should say something.
Hi. First of all, I just want to say thank you to the panelists for, your time and, sharing your insightful thoughts. For context, I'm not the biggest soccer fan. I am familiar with the sports, being Nigerian, of Nigerian background. And I will say I am intrigued with it, and I'm here because I feel like the sports can be used as a lens to discuss what I call juicy topics, like culture, the larger topics about politics and migration. And just from, I was in the panel in the other room before, and from everything I've heard, I feel like there's so many layers to kind of like unraveling the lasting impacts of colonization, especially from the lens of soccer. And I think the other panel touched about like accessibility and how the sport is being priced out and really available to really rich kids. And even from then, you can even put on the layer of African talent being exported and to these European teams, and then getting paid like less than their European counterparts. So like there's so many layers to unravel there. I will say that I have been seeing like players born within the diaspora like going back home, to represent their home country. And I feel like just looking forward, and I think when it comes to what you guys have said about decolonizing the sports, I feel like there's been a lot of emphasis on like the states and government's involvement. But I want to pose this question, like how can creatives like myself, or entrepreneurs, or just fans of the sports, or people within diaspora, like what are things that, how can we get involved or contribute to, I guess, bettering the infrastructures that are available in our home or local countries or things like that? Because I feel like not, I don't want to put all of our hopes on the government, but like I think there are other ways that we can create synergies between soccer and other industries. Like, for example, like with fashion and creative, like the Nigeria soccer kits and things like that. Like, are there other creative avenues or ways that we can, bring money in, or just like bring those resources into the sports that's not necessarily just reliant on the government? And if anyone knows of any initiatives or programs that are currently doing that, I think it's a matter of just sharing those, maybe sharing it to people who can amplify the message of what those programs are doing, or sharing it to the people who actually need those resources. So I guess this is a question to everyone in the room and the panel as well.
It's a hard question. Yeah. You,
I could real quick while they're talking because I'm going to say thank you and then I'm going to have to pull because single parenting, because patriarchy. Anyway.
do you have a microphone?
Oh, I need a mic. Okay. I feel like I'm so loud. Okay, just to say, FIFA actually doesn't charge, I believe, still for 1,000 and under fan viewing parties. So you can organize your own viewing party, watch party, an inclusive party that celebrates the immigrant diasporic contributions to this game, that is LGBTQ inclusive, that is racially inclusive, all the things that FIFA hasn't been. And I think you can get licensing rights for 1,000 or under. I think most people don't know that. And when they do, they might stop it. But I believe that to still be true today. It's still true? Yes. Okay, and Harlem FC, South Bronx United, those are some great organizations right here. Harlem FC, Irv Smalls, I don't know if he's here. You've worked with them, Uriel, back there, right? Yes? Okay. No, but you can rep that initiative, right? So that's all that. And now I really want to talk less and say thank you so much. And I'm so sorry, and it's not disrespectful to you that I have to go.
It was so nice to meet you.
Thank you, Brenda.
We have a lot of respect for you.
Thank you, Brenda.
So there's just one thing that I would like to say about the possibility of doing something. You know, players, African players that are going back to Africa and playing for their national teams. Some of them go because they think that they have to go, maybe because of their education, their consciousness and things like that. But many of them go also because they can't find a way into the teams of the English teams, the French teams, and so on and so forth. Now, when it comes to doing something, you know, I created an organization that I call Tuso Sport, which means sports for all, or all to sports. The biggest issue that I have is that on the continent, it is complicated to get anybody to do anything without being paid, without having money. It is so complicated. And I'm just a poor professor. I cannot pay anybody, you know? So the only way I can deal with this is to find a big sponsor that maybe can decide to pay the people who are working to promote sports for everybody. So the idea, the motto of the organization, sports for all, everywhere and every place. I mean, everywhere, but that idea is difficult to implant in the communities because we have been so much distorted by this idea that you need this sponsor, you need these private corporations and things like that. It's the same thing here in many cases. When you go to the communities, people, Coca-Cola is always present, sponsoring something. So these ideas has completely pervaded our own societies, and it is difficult to get something going when we don't have a big sponsor. But it doesn't mean that one should not try, and I'm still trying. When I fail, I would still say, I tried. And you know, we are all passing, right? At that point, someone else may pick up their idea and then move on with it. A good example is Africa is a country, you know, something that was done long ago. Now somebody has taken it up and is moving with it. And that's the way things should go. The world is not stopping now. It's going to go on forever, and good things can happen. Good things can happen, Nora.
I think good things can happen. I think that there are things that you like to do. I mean, something. Okay. I think, what we try to do at Lift a Club in part is raise money for organizations. So like we collaborate with organizations in Palestine, but I'm sure there's lots of organizations in Nigeria or wherever. So it's just community organizing. An organization we work with is called Leite Celtic, and they run like a youth sports recreation center in a refugee camp in Bethlehem. And that's just one example. I think doing the sort of like cross-functional and working with community organizations in Nigeria or other places is also a great idea to connect the diaspora with on the ground work as well. That's just an idea.
Great panelists. Yeah.
Can I say just one thing? I'm part of an organization that is called Sports Africa. And we are a group of professors coming from various disciplines who try to put our thinking to the state of football in Africa. So we promote research, but we also include in our group people who are in the field doing things. And we have conferences. We used to have conferences every year, but it is tough. Now we have them every 2 years. Last time we were in Abidjan in 2025, and we started the conferences in the United States at Ohio University. So for about 10 years, but we've decided that we were going to move it to the continent. We had conferences in South Africa, in Senegal, in Cote d'Ivoire, and in Zambia. And in 2027, we are going to have another conference in Cape Town. And but we are a very small organization, but we are proud that we have been able to do this without having Coca-Cola or without having a Nike supporting us. So I would encourage you to join us if you want. The website is sportsafrica.org. And then all our conferences, all our webinars about different aspects of African sports, is there about women, about the turf, and all kinds of things. So please go and visit that and bring your creative ideas to it.
And just before finishing, and thank you all for this panel, I would also like to remember, so Sean in the last panel said about Black Lives Matter, and I believe the US has this powerful thing about branding and advertising, and they put these into their movements, and I think this is like making brand of grassroots movement. And I would like to even shout out for the Peleja people that are here, Brazilians. So they do that with the branding, documenting, and I believe like as a creative there's a lot to do on doing the resistance. So thank you all for this amazing evening. Thank you. Africa is a country.
Thank you very much to Anna, to Simon, to Noor. I really hope you guys take up the mantle of running for FIFA president. If not, name me your price and I will. No, I'm kidding. Thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you to all of us for journeying with us this evening. The journey does not end here. There is one more panel, not in this room, but if you go around to room 1, there is a live taping of the African Five-A-Side podcast with Maher Mazahi, Alexander Haman, as well as Zito Madu. So if you want to catch that, if you want to stick around, please do. It'll be great. So if you just exit over here and you go around the corner. And then the most important detail, at the Shrine in Harlem, there will be an after party. We'll be featuring African DJs going up against each other in a versus battle, head to head. So come to that. There'll be drinks, there'll be libations and merriment. So that's going to be at the shrine. So that starts, I think, at about 9:30. When we're done here, we're going to head there. So stick around. There's 90 minutes to go, and another 90 minutes, and another 90 minutes after. So thank you very much for coming, and hope you guys stick around. And if you haven't grabbed a copy of our special issue, there are some more copies at the back, so please do help yourselves.